Good morning. Hi, I'm the Hermit of Loch Eyre, aka Mike Jones. I want to welcome you to Loch Eyre. Sunrise on the lake is always a special time. I couldn't catch it on film, but there must have been 300 ducks sitting here that just took off when I made some noise. I don't see sunrise here too often in the summer when the sun comes up at 4, but in the winter it gives me a better opportunity. Hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I'm filming this before Thanksgiving. And anticipating I'm going to have all 5 of my children home for Thanksgiving, first time in decades. About 12, 13 years ago, I had the opportunity to teach a high school Sunday school class, and I really look forward to it. I have 5 children, as I mentioned, and several of them were high school age or around that time. And I put a lot of work and thought into this class to have an impact on these like 10 or 12 high school kids. And the first session, I actually made it 3 sessions before I got canned. But the first session, I put on the board, the blackboard, biblical mandates and Christian culture, two parallel lines. And I started throwing out ideas, and I wasn't trying to lead them in any way, just throwing out thoughts, and they would put it in which category. So under the category of Christian or biblical mandates, they put Sunday morning church, the church building, Sunday school, preaching, gospel hymns, not saying words such as shit and damn. I didn't say that. I just said swear words. The word swear words that people use, swear is something totally different. And it has to do with lying. And the Bible is talking about don't make oaths, because your words should be true. You don't need to make oaths. That's the point of that. But anyway, they put that under biblical mandates. Dressing nice on Sunday, biblical mandates. It went on. Praying before your meals is a biblical mandate. Praying before football games is a biblical mandate. What else? It went on and on. Believing that the earth is 6,000 years old is a biblical mandate. And we got done. There was nothing under Christian culture. And I wanted to just start stirring some thinking. Okay, where in the Bible does it say all these things that you said are biblical mandates? And no one had an answer, because there is no answer. There is no place in the Bible that says that. But my point was trying to draw this contrast. Now, I got canned partially for that. And then the next 2 Sundays, I wanted to focus on social media and what the kids were experiencing from media, including music, movies, TV shows. So the next week we looked at music. They brought in their favorite song. We looked at the lyrics and discussed the lyrics. I thought it was very profoundly insightful, because the first guy brought in the lyrics, a song, his favorite song, and it talked about life is meaningless and why don't you just kill yourself? Seriously. That opened a whole Pandora's box of discussion, and making reference to, if Christianity is true, it gives meaning. We have some obligation to find this meaning and not to kill ourselves, in other words. So I thought it was a very interesting discussion with high school students. Then the third week, the favorite TV show of all the kids was the TV show Lost. So we went to my house and watched an episode, and then discussed. We spent 2 hours. It went beyond church time. We spent 2 hours discussing the philosophical basis to some of the thoughts that was put forth in Lost. Some of them good, some of them not so good. And we looked at biblical ideas, Christian ideas, and versus pantheistic and other ideas. And then I got a note from the pastor that never again will I be allowed to teach the kids. And the reason was I violated social norms. He said, Sunday school, you only study the Bible. And that's what these kids have been exposed to their whole life, studying the Bible. And I remember when I was a kid growing up in a Baptist church, we'd have these quarterlies, they were called, they're Bible verses, and we would read them this monotone, silly, Jesus, we'll try to just, be as goofy as we could. And the teacher didn't know that before they walked in, we were sitting there telling really dirty jokes, and I won't go into that story. But anyway, I hope you understand where I'm coming from here. And last time I was talking about culture in a generic term, and its ideas, I'm not talking down to anyone. I know you know those things. Everyone knows those things. But I'm going to do a little bit more generic talking about culture, and then dive into this idea of what we call Christianity. How much of it is culture? I think most of it is. And the bare essentials are very, very, very simple. And that's why in this post-Christian world, it's a post-Christian culture world, and I want to delineate what's essential. What do you take with you? And it's not much. You can put it in one pocket. What you need in this post-Christian world. Now, at the end of this today, I'm going to tell a positive story about the local church, because this is a niche, a video series. People who are disillusioned with church, disillusioned with Christianity, who've left or think about leaving. It's not for people who really enjoy local church and are happy, because if you're happy with it, good for you. Stay with it. I'm not, saying, the church is a bad place or anything like that. I'm just saying there's alternative thinking. But I do want to tell a story at the end, so you won't get the idea. I'm just here saying negative things about organized religion, organized Christianity. That's not my point. That's not my purpose. So I'm going to tell one more general idea about culture, just to bring it to the surface, to attention. I think about blue jeans. I'm wearing blue jeans today. I wear blue jeans most days. They're very comfortable. They're rugged for most part. But I can remember the first day I put on a pair of jeans, and it was pretty traumatic. I was a senior in high school, and I was one of the last people to wear blue jeans. I was, there's maybe a couple of nerds who wore dress pants and me. And one of the reasons I didn't is my father was totally opposed to me wearing jeans. And he had a good reason. He grew up in Western Virginia in a coal mining country. His family were coal miners. And they wore jeans in the mines. And it was considered a poor person's type of clothing. And he did not want his son wearing jeans out in public, because, it carried a connotation to him very different from what it did to me. Now, I go to school, and I was talking about, to you to go back and think about middle school and elementary school. Well, it's a brutal system when you're first coming into these ideas of sociology and culture, and you don't really understand what's going on, but there's intense pressure. And the pressure I mentioned, all social groups have the pressure of being cool, being smart, and being good. And in high school, of course, the number one, just like middle school, is being cool. And I was not cool by not wearing jeans. It was, it's talking about these social mores and cultural things are stored in this very primitive part of the brain called the insula, that it is so intense that it's like an addiction that to break those mores. I gave the illustration wearing a Speedo to church. Can you imagine the emotional difficulty it would be to do that? Or it doesn't have to be church. If there was a lecture in town about geology and you show up in a Speedo, it'd be almost the same, not quite, but almost the same feeling of just this awful feeling. And that's the way I was feeling it in school. But I want to go back and think about blue jeans and how they became cool, at least in those days. I think it was in the 16th century, 1500s, that in a town of Mines, M-I-M-E-S, I think it's spelled in France, there's a large loom, and they said, we want to create a clothing item that's tough and cheap. And so they said, okay, let's make one of cotton, not silk or linen or anything that's more expensive, and let's use large threads. That makes it cheaper and that makes it tougher. And so they started weaving this cloth, and let's use the cheapest dye, indigo, that you can get. And they created what was called stuff from the Mines, the town of the Mines. My French is horrible, but the Mines, and it became the Mines, then denim, then finally became denim time it got to America. But a few decades later, down in Italy, Genoa, a town on the coast, in those days, they were sort of like city-states. Each city had their own government and security, and not just police, but actually armies. Genoa had its own navy, and they decided to deck out their sailors in denim, because it was a tough material, it was cheap, and the blue color matched the sea, in their opinion. So then it got the name denim, and the people in Genoa was called jeans, just like Americans, or people in America call Americans, people in France are called French, people in Genoa were called jeans. So it became denim, jeans. And then it got, the concept spread to a lot of not just sailors, not just, official navies, but merchant marines started wearing denim. And then it got to the eastern coast of America in New York, and in all the shipyards, people started wearing the same material. And then it started working its way into the farming land. Farmers, miners, like my dad was talking about, started wearing denim. But then in 1848 and 49, they discovered gold in California, and there's this crazy rush to California to try to get rich. And there, miners, started wearing denim. Again, it's a tough material, good for miners to wear. Levi Strauss, and he had a partner, and I forgot his partner's name, had a hardware store. And they've said that people who supplied miners made the most money than the miners. There's a few miners got rich, but most of them didn't find much. So they started supplying them with denim, and one day they came up with an idea, because the pockets were the weak part of the pants. They put their hands in their pockets, and they put rocks in their pockets and stuff, and the pockets would tear. So they just put a copper rivet, and that was the birth of Levi Strauss brand of jeans, blue jeans. So it was still a workman's clothing, like my dad had felt, not something he didn't want his son wearing. But then Marlon Brando had a motorcycle movie. I'm trying to remember the name of it. You'll probably know it. Anyway, and he wore. They decided to cast him wearing blue jeans as a tough, make him look a little bit tougher. And a few years later, James Dean starred in A Rebel Without Cause. He had a white t-shirt, these blue jeans that were radiant. And I think he has blue eyes, blonde hair, extremely handsome man. And there's a poster of him from that movie that, is a classic. And every woman in America fell in love with James Dean. I think it was more than any current heartthrob like Brad Pitt or people like that. There was just one. I mean, maybe Elvis would arrive that when Elvis was alive, but James Dean just took the world by storm, at least America. So every girl wanted to be with James Dean, and every man was jealous of James Dean. It was that point that men out in the community who weren't farmers, who weren't miners, started wearing jeans, and then they started wearing them to school, and then it became really cool, very, very cool, to wear jeans to school. Now, I don't know so much today. I mean, it's a common clothing because it's comfortable and those things. If jeans had been made out of burlap, the fad would have died. So the fad continues just because it's a comfortable clothing, and it does resist wear pretty well. But, this is a fad, and fads not only cover clothing, but they cover conversation, and more than anything, they cover thinking. But once a thinking fad gets locked into our brains, we think it's reality. We don't understand that it's just a fad, that people 50 years ago thought differently, and people 100 years before that thought differently because of these fads. These fads come and go and come and go. So anyway, that was another general idea about culture. So in this series, I'm going to cover several topics, but just getting into now church and culture, and making this division between what we call Christianity and what is essential. I really advise people just go and there's a group of pastors called the Red Letter Christians, and I sort of relate to what they're saying. You know, some Bibles are printed with red letters to show what Jesus Christ said. I think it's very helpful to see the essence of Christianity. So many things that we accept today, just like those high school kids that I was trying to teach as being absolute part of biblical mandates, it's just really not in the Bible. Now, when your culture tells you something is true and tells you it's from the Bible, then you read the Bible and you pull that out of the Bible when it doesn't say anything like that. And I gave the example of abortion. The Bible does not address abortion, not even tangentially. It certainly addresses murder, and there's a few verses about that we are becoming human in our mother's womb. Now again, before you write me hate mail, because this is the number one issue for conservative Christianity and their culture, and it dominates everything else. Just purely dominates, and they can't think outside that box that the death of a fetus is exactly the same as murdering an adult. But they put those words in the Bible with their minds, and the words just simply are not there. So other things are not there. The whole concept of Sunday morning church. I grew up, when you became a Christian, the socialization process was, it probably would be first thing you stop saying so-called swear words. Now, swear words are a product of the Victorian age. Before the Victorian age, even good church-going people spoke what we would now consider profanity on a regular basis. It was just part of common speech. It was during the Victorian age that certain words were declared unchristian. And even till today, talking about wearing a Speedo, if you go in church and you are asked to speak and you're up in front and say, well, what the hell's going on here today? Damn idiots. You start using those words and you would be frowned upon, deeply frowned upon. My last novel I wrote, I used a character that was not a religious character. His family had some religious contact, but he wasn't. He was a typical 37-year-old guy, that was put in some extremely difficult situations, horrible. So he used a lot of profanities. I've had several people from my church who told me how disappointed they were in me for using profanities. And it's just this culture thing. It has nothing to do with the Bible. Yet, those things of being smart, being good, being cool. And Christianity is all religions. The number one is being good. So they were basically saying, Mike, you're bad. You're bad because you wrote those words in your book. And that's the coercion that you get in Christian culture. So all the things that those kids listed in high school that were biblical mandates, none of them are. None of them are. I'm sorry. And yes, you can try to pull verses out of the Bible to support your culture. But the whole church concept to me, and even Christianity in general, is a man-made system to me, mostly culture. I'm trying to remember the verse that, anyway. It's in the Old Testament. I think it is God talking to Saul. But anyway, he made a statement that just simple obedience is your reasonable service of worship. But the church has created a Sunday morning worship that this is a mandate from the Bible, and you just can't find it. You can't find going to church at 9 in the morning, at 10 in the morning, and being preached to every Sunday. I don't think Sunday morning church is very good for relationships. You don't talk to people. I mean, my church has a coffee time, and I know I don't go to that because of my cancer. One person coughs on me, and it's the end of my life because I have cancer of my immune system. I'm sort of like a bubble boy without the bubble. So, I take blame for that. But small groups really meet that much better, relationships. So anyway, that was the point with this part about culture, that now that we're moving into a post-Christian world, they are rejecting Sunday morning church. They're rejecting all these Christian rules that have nothing to do with the Bible. You must be a Republican. You must hate immigrants. Now, I mean, this is new. This is new. This is not only is it not in the Bible, it's the things now are almost opposite the teaching of Christ. I have a large group of very conservative evangelical friends that are still friends. I think they would consider me friends. I love them. I would take a bullet for them. But I was perplexed when they fell deeply in love with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump's life is almost the exact antithesis, the opposite of the historical Jesus of Galilee. Totally opposite. And these are not rumors. There's rumors I won't even talk about because they may not be true. But people knew him as someone who loves money, someone who lies all the time, someone who he boasted about having 1,000 or more sexual relationships with, 1,000 different women, even while he was married. All those things are the complete opposite of the historical Jesus. The way he views immigrants, the way he views people of color, those things, totally opposite. And they love him. And they love him for the simple reason of power. Seriously. A friend of mine who's a pastor, conservative pastor, told me that Donald Trump is the greatest American Christian in history. And I had to laugh. It just blows my mind. But I'm going to go back, and then I'm ending this. I would talk about in this post-Christian world, the conservative churches, the way they're dealing with it, the fact that they're losing their grip on American culture, is that I talk about these circles, social circles, that they build the wall around their circle thicker. They have more rules. You must now believe the earth is 6,000 years old. That wasn't true 100 years ago, but now you have to. There's layer upon layer upon layer of things you must believe, or you're going to have intense ridicule. And that's why I don't fit into almost any church, is that I'm really tired of nonconformity, my nonconformity to Christian culture being something that people want to whack me over the head about. So the way they see the conservative Christians to take back the country is through power. And they've told me that they want to get evangelicals elected at every office, every judgeship, and then impose Christian law, just like my Muslim friends, some of them want to impose Sharia law on the culture. They want to impose Christian law, and I've heard them go too far as saying imprisonment and actually execution of people who've done abortions, people who've had abortions, people who in gay relationships, put them to death. It's just nuts. It's totally nuts. And they see the future that they're going to take over the country and impose their ideas. And all these ideas, it's not even really, biblical ideas. It's cultural ideas. Our government does put people to death for murder or puts them in prison for a long period of time. And that is a biblical concept. 10 Commandments, do not commit a murder. Do not commit murder. But these other things just are not there. Just are not there in the Bible. And these people claim to be biblical Christians. On the other extreme, there's a spectrum. So that's the conservative churches. The liberal churches, the way they're approaching this diminishing influence in our society is that they want to create an experience that reminds people of church, the church building, music, all the things that resemble the church that people grew up in. And a lot of these churches, the people all have white hair. They're older people. And a sense of peace, personal peace, comfortable, been very, very comfortable in that setting. Now, the thing I like about the more liberal church is that they are involved with social things, which I see mandated, look at Christ, to seek justice, kindness, love, that they express this love to the community. However, They've also adopted the postmodern philosophy, and throughout the history of the church has always adopted secular philosophies, even though they were warned by Paul not to do that. They've done it. Traditions and secular philosophies, always from day one, and it's going to be part of my series to go through those. So they've adopted postmodernism, and postmodernism started out with some constructive things. I say constructive because they were deconstructing American culture, or any culture they were in, and then they evolved into more the way the postmodern is today, that there is no truth, that you can then start to mix totally opposite religious systems. Buddhism and Christianity are really opposites. If you look at the metaphysical assertions by each one, and so it makes no logical sense to put them in the same box. They're not. It's not a dogmatic thing saying, oh, you're a Buddhist, you're going to hell. It's not me doing that. It's just saying logically, it makes no sense. And when you get rid of truth, and that's what they're doing, soon comes everything. The whole world starts to crumble, the whole world model. You can't have ethics without truth. How can you say that racism is bad if the other person, their opinion is racism is good? You have no grounds to stand on if there's no truth. So that's where it collapses. So I said I was going to close in a story, and I will. A story about, I have shown you the mist on the horizon now from the forest as the sun is not quite up yet. When I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma 5 years ago, I started out very, very sick. I was in renal failure. My GFR should be above 60, was 4. I was put on dialysis. My potassium was so high that they couldn't get it down, and the doctors told me I may not make it. So I was very, very sick. But I came out of the hospital after ICU. I was getting ready for bone marrow transplant. I was sick as a dog. I was sick and suffering beyond what I thought a human could suffer. And someone from church, might have been the pastor of the church I'm associated with, asked, is there anything we can do for you, Mike? We had just moved here to the lake, and every time we moved, my wife's favorite hobby is gardening. And I always build her a garden. She can't do it, she doesn't know how to build, fencing and gates and the things you need for gardening. You have to put fence up, keep deer out, and rabbits out. So I said, the greatest thing you could do for me is help me build a garden for my wife. There's no way I could have done it. It was hard for me to walk from the car to the house. I was that sick and that weak. I was spending every other day in dialysis for 6 hours. But the word got out, and 18 wonderful people from our local church showed up 2 Saturdays in a row and gave their entire Saturdays to build this garden. And I was deeply humbled. I bought the materials, I designed it, but I couldn't help them. Matter of fact, both Saturdays I was in dialysis all day, showing up right at the very end when they were leaving. But that's the kind of thing that a local congregation can be really good at. Now, I said a lot of negative things about the church where I grew up, and everything I said was true. But even there, in this very, very pretentious Christian society, the church was an anchor for the community, for social activities. And it was very important to my mother, at least, not so much my dad, but to a lot of people, church life was very, very important. So I'm not challenging that, and if church life is very important to you, hang on to it. I'm talking to people who are leaving because it makes no sense to them. They're tired of trying to follow these plethora of social rules and mores, the kinds of things that get me in trouble all the time. Anyway, I hope, this is before Thanksgiving, but I hope your Thanksgiving is really special this year. And you have a good day.